On the prequel to the 42nd episode, we're learning about adapting real life and previewing BlacKKlansman. Well, welcome back to This Film Is Lit, a podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. It's the prequel to the 42nd episode, and as I said, we are first learning things, and what we're learning is about adapting real life.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about this because this is the first, definite memoir that we've done on here.
Which is the thing I just learned today about this movie.
You didn't know it was based on a true story?
I don't think I did. Maybe I had heard it and it went in one ear and out the other, but I had always just assumed, I guess because it's so... The trailers always made it look so over the top and wild and just weird that I was assumed it was just a
flight of fancy.
Yeah, a fictional story, but apparently not.
Yeah, no, it's based on a memoir.
Yes.
And a memoir, I think we mentioned this in the Christmas Story episode, maybe.
Probably.
Because we talked a little bit about whether or not that one would be considered a memoir, and we kind of landed on
it's fictionalized
not really.
Memoir, yeah.
Yeah. But this one is very definitely a memoir, and a memoir, the way that differs from an autobiography is that a memoir is a zoom in on a specific point in somebody's life, a specific experience that they had or time in their life.
Yeah.
Whereas autobiography more generally covers the entire
their whole life, yeah.
But I wanted to talk about this because I find it really interesting. So as an audience, we expect certain things from stories. We have a specific set of expectations from narrative. We expect narrative arcs, right? Building action, climax, falling action. We expect character development. We expect a denouement or some kind of closure at the end of the story. But real life doesn't always work like that. Real life doesn't give us plot lines. So turning a real life account of something that happened into a digestible story, I think, is a kind of complex thing. Now, I have some experience with writing memoir and creative nonfiction. Not a ton of experience, mind you. But some. So I'm going to speak from that experience. My own experience, writing on my own, and also from classes that I've taken and other writers that I've worked with. So again, I'm speaking from that.
Yeah.
Okay. And one thing that I want to talk about that has stuck with me is the concept of what truth is when you're turning truth into a narrative, into a story. And I had a professor who would talk about capital T truth and lowercase t truth. So lowercase t truth is the nuts and bolts of what actually happened, and the time frame that it happened in, the people who were involved with it, etc., etc. Capital T truth is the emotional truth of what happened. It's the things that you learned, what you got out of the experience, the emotional impact that it had on you. So when you turn real life into a narrative, into a story, the capital T truth, the emotional truth, becomes more important in a sense.
Yes.
Because narrative might dictate that you have to omit some things, or you have to combine events, or maybe combine multiple people into one character, or speed up a timeline, or dramatize something because we needed an action beat here.
Yeah.
Right? But at the end of the day, I think despite what you have to change about the nuts and bolts, the capital T emotional truth should still be intact. I think that should still be there.
Yes.
So obviously, as always, as we continue with this review, I'm really interested to see what changes the movie makes from the memoir. But in this case, I'm also really interested to see if the movie respects that emotional truth and keeps it intact.
Yes, that will be interesting to see. That's from my reading that a little bit I've done about the movie so far. I think that was their main goal, and I think the movie probably takes licenses for sure.
Yes.
I mean, I know it does, based again from the few things I've read. But I think that the main thing that they were going for was that emotional truth and the sort of the impact that they thought this story could have. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the preview. So, cool. Well done, Katie.
Thanks.
That was interesting. Well, let's move on to BlacKKlansman Book Facts.
There's never been a black cop in this city. We think you might be the man to open things up around here.
Hello, this is Ron Stallworth calling. Well, who am I speaking with?
This is David Duke.
Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. That David Duke?
All right, so BlacKKlansman is a 2014 memoir by Ron Stallworth. Most of what I have is more about him, because it is a memoir.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to get into a lot about him even, because then it's
like
spoilers.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting kind of line to ride as I was making these notes. But Stallworth is a retired police officer, and he was the first black officer and detective in the Colorado Springs Police Department. That was 1974 was when he was sworn into the force. He was born in Chicago, but he grew up in Texas. I thought this was kind of interesting. In high school, he was on student council. He was on a district-wide advisory board. He was also a cheerleader.
Oh.
And he was voted most popular.
Well, there you go.
So sounds like a fun guy.
Yeah.
His family moved to Colorado Springs in 1972, which is when he took an interest in law enforcement. And after just 10 months as a uniformed patrol officer, he was offered an undercover position. Following that, then, he was transferred to the department's intelligence section. So it didn't take him long to get where he wanted to go.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. So for source material for this memoir, he actually used a casebook that he assembled during this assignment and then kind of kept after it ended. I do have a couple things that I don't think are super spoilery.
Okay.
So the way that he kind of got into this undercover investigation was that in 1979 he noticed a want ad in the local paper seeking members to start a new chapter of the KKK in Colorado Springs, and was kind of like,
Yeah.
so called up the phone number that was listed and posed as someone who was wanting to join.
Yeah.
Also, then in an interview he did, I think in 2006, he disclosed that the undercover investigation he did actually revealed several Klan members who were active members of the armed forces, including two who worked at, is it NORAD or is it
NORAD?
NORAD, do you pronounce it like that?
You just say NORAD,
that control triggers for nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, that's a little more complicated than that, from what I understand. But yes,
But cool beans.
Yeah.
So, Stallworth is also the author of 3 additional books, most of which are about hip hop and gang related codes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat.
Yeah. Cool. And just in case anybody hasn't seen the movie or is unaware of what it is, what he did was that, and we kind of touched on it there, is that he went undercover in the KKK.
Yeah.
Hence the name BlacKKlansman.
Yeah.
He's a black cop who kind of went undercover to infiltrate the KKK. So that's what's going on there. All right, let's move on and talk a little bit about BlacKKlansman the film.
What can I do for you?
Well, since you asked, I hate blacks. I hate Jews, Mexicans, and Irish, Italians, and Chinese. But my mouth to God's ears, I really hate those black rats. And anyone else, really, that doesn't have pure white Aryan blood running through their veins.
I'm happy to be talking to a true white American.
God bless white America.
So BlacKKlansman, because the movie title is BlacKKlansman with 3 Ks in the...
Smushed it together and added extra
a K in the middle, yeah. Which makes sense, visually, but I'm not exactly sure how you're supposed to say it. I'm wondering, what I think it's just BlacKKlansman probably still, but yeah. So I was like, well, how do I say this? All right. So it's directed by Spike Lee. Most famous, probably most well-known for he's directed a ton of stuff, but probably most famously Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, and a more popular, less critical film is Inside Man, which is kind of like an action thriller heist movie with Denzel. The movie was written by 4 different people, or adapted by 4 different people: Charlie Wachtel, David Rabinowitz, Kevin Wilmot, and Spike Lee himself. And 2 of those people are kind of the ones who discovered the book and decided to make it a screenplay. In 2015, Charlie Wachtel and David Rabinowitz, who are both screenwriters and producers on the project, discovered the book. They ended up interviewing Stallworth and wrote a spec screenplay, and then they pitched that to some other producers. And then all 4 of them together brought this to QC Entertainment, which had co-produced Get Out in 2017. Okay. And again, QC then teamed up with Jason Blum's company, Blumhouse Production, who's made most of the good mid-level horror films in the last 10 years, and also were co-producers on Get Out, I'm pretty sure. And Jordan Peele's company, Monkey Paw, who's doing his film that's coming, Us, which is coming out, and all that sort of stuff, to produce the project. And then Spike Lee signed on to direct, and John David Washington, who is Denzel Washington's son, was in the became signed on to be the star of the film. And fun fact about John David Washington, I thought was interesting, his very first film role was as a 4th grader in Malcolm X in one class, as an extra in a classroom scene in Malcolm X. It's been a long time. It's been since film school since I saw Malcolm X, but there's apparently a scene in a school, and he was plays some random 4th grader. So full circle.
We watched that in high school. When I was in high school, we watched that in one of my history classes.
I think I watched it in a film class in high school, now that I think about it, but I can't remember. It was either that or in college. But yeah. But it's been since then since I've seen Malcolm X. So I've seen Do the Right Thing more recently, which is really good.
Yeah.
And probably should have won Best Picture, or at least Best Director, but... Maybe Spike will get one of the awards this year. BlacKKlansman won the Grand Prix at the Cannes Film Festival, which is their 2nd place trophy after the Palme d'Or, which is what everybody's heard of. But the Grand Prix is still a prestigious award. I actually didn't look and see what won the Palme d'Or. I should have looked that up this year, or last year. Contrary to popular belief, and this is kind of a spoiler for the movie, the real Ston Walworth never used a quote-unquote white voice on the phone. He said he had to use his real voice because he thought they would have caught him because he would have slipped up. If he was trying to do a quote-unquote white voice on the phone, he was like, I'll mess up, and they'll notice that I'm changing my voice. So he decided not to do that. So Topher Grace plays David Duke in the film, the infamous David Duke. And Topher Grace said in an interview after the film came out that portraying David Duke left him feeling depressed. So as an act of catharsis, he took on the project of editing Peter Jackson's trilogy of films based on The Hobbit into a single 2-hour movie.
What?
Now that's not an completely out of nowhere thing. Topher Grace is a big sort of fan of film and very much a film student. But he sort of infamously did the same thing with the Star Wars prequels, and there's this big sort of nobody's ever seen it except for Topher Grace's friends because he can't show it because of copyright and stuff, or he can't distribute it in any way. But he apparently edited the prequels into a 2-hour film, and everybody who's seen it said it's the best version of the it's great.
Yeah.
And so he went about, and it's another interesting project to do that with. Because, the prequels have a lot of good things and a lot of bad things in them. I feel the same way about the Hobbit movies, where they have their high points and a lot of low points at the same time. So combining that into a 2-hour film kind of makes potentially makes a lot of sense, and that's what he...
Like, interesting to me that he would do that to make himself feel better, because
Yeah.
I feel like it would make me feel worse.
He's one of those people who just likes retreating and editing, apparently, because he does it quite a bit, so I thought that was interesting. The film contains clips from D.W. Griffith's silent movie, The Birth of a Nation, which I watched some of in film school, not all of it.
I don't think I've ever seen that one.
We'll talk about it. While Spike Lee was a student at NYU film school, obviously, he was so outraged that NYU showed the professors taught Birth of a Nation, but they didn't make any mention of its like racist message or the role that the Klan played in the film. That he made a short film reaction, like his own short film to it, responding to it, called The Answer. And the film offended so many of his professors that Lee was nearly expelled from NYU. But ultimately, he was saved by a faculty vote. They voted on whether or not to kick Spike Lee out. And then after Spike Lee went on to have his career in the film industry, he became a professor at NYU. And he serves as the artistic director of the graduate film department. So it's a big F you to them. And speaking of Birth of a Nation, for anybody who doesn't know or hasn't seen it, Birth of a Nation is a sort of a revolutionary film technique and filmmaking wise from the very early 20th century. It came out in 1915, and it's sort of, it was, like I said, we learned about it in film school. It was very revolutionary in a lot of what they did,
Stuff that hadn't been done before.
Yeah, and the way the narrative is set up, and just the filmmaking techniques that the movie uses were all very revolutionary, and it is, it is a part of film history because of those things. But it's also the heroes of the movie are the Klan, so it's not without its faults. But so to kind of put this part in here, in 2013, American film critic Richard Brody, writing for AFI, wrote that The Birth of a Nation was a seminal commercial spectacle, but also a decisively original work of art, in effect the founding work of cinematic realism, albeit a work that was developed to pass lies off as reality. It's tempting to think of the film's influence as evidence of the inherent corruption of realism as a cinematic mode, but it's even more revealing to acknowledge the disjunction between its beauty, on the one hand, and on the other, its injustice and falsehood. The movie's fabricated events shouldn't lead any viewer to deny the historical facts of slavery and Reconstruction, but they also shouldn't lead to a denial of the peculiar, disturbingly exalted beauty of Birth of a Nation, even if its depiction of immoral actions and its realization of blatant propaganda. The worst thing about The Birth of a Nation is how good it is. The merits of its grand and enduring aesthetic make it impossible to ignore, and despite its disgusting content, also make it hard not to love. And it's that very conflict that renders the film all the more despicable, the experience of the film more of a torment, together with the acknowledgement that Griffith, whose short films of biograph, I'm not sure what that is, were already among the treasures of world cinema, yoked his mighty talent to the cause of hatred, which, still worse, he sincerely depicted as virtuous. So, it's a controversial film, but it's, kind of revolutionary in ways. So apparently the real David Duke called Ron Stallworth to express his concern over his buffoonish, cartoonish idiot portrayal in the film.
Really?
So that's about all. That's all I had on that topic. I just thought that was funny. I'm surprised that he thought Ron Stallworth was interested in his opinion on that. I love also, I have this note, Duke also added that he respected director Spike Lee.
Okay.
Interesting. After seeing the film, he was not pleased that the film did not follow the events of the book. So apparently David Duke thinks he comes off like roses in the book, but the movie not as much.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
It's interested. That's what I said. I had to include that because I'm interested to see sort of the disparity and if David Duke comes off good in the book. I find that hard to believe, but sure. That's a really interesting note.
I wouldn't have thought that David Duke would either read this book or watch this movie, so that shocks me.
And apparently he's got Ron Stallworth's phone number, so interesting. And finally, the film is dedicated to the life of Heather Heyer, who was famously hit by a car while protesting the Unite the Right rally in 2017 in Charlottesville. The film opened in the U.S. on August 10th, 2018, to mark the one-year anniversary of the rally and of her death. So there's a title credit at the end,
cool,
honoring her. So I thought that was interesting and cool. And apparently it was something that really affected Spike Lee.
So part of the reason that we wanted to do this book, I mean, the larger reason is that I think it's interesting and important. But another part of the reason was that it is nominated for 6 Oscars.
It's up for a lot of Oscars.
Yeah.
Best Picture, Best Director.
Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, a couple other ones.
Yeah, and that Best Adapted being a very, obviously, that being nominated for Best Adapted makes it kind of perfect for our podcast.
For what we do here.
Yeah, and none of the other Best Adapted struck me as interesting as this one.
There were, and there were quite a few that weren't adapted from books, that were like adapted from
we mentioned
movies.
We discussed the potential of doing The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is up for Best Adapted, and it's on Netflix, but it's adapted from several short stories. It's apparently the movie sounds like it's like vignettes, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's adapted from several different short stories. Some of them are more well-known and easy to find. Other ones I couldn't even find a source of what they were adapted from. So
we'll be watching the Oscars, I guess.
We'll have it on.
We'll have it on.
I have it on. I don't know how much I'll watch. I don't really watch many award shows.
They're not all that interesting, in my opinion.
I find it interesting to see what wins.
Yeah.
Like, I find that interesting. And when there's a movie that I really like, I enjoy. Like when Shape of Water won. That was like my favorite movie that year, and I was really glad that it was nominated and ended up winning. But, I don't also.
So I think the ceremony is a couple days after our main episode for this. So we will then be checking back in
to see how it did.
To see if it won anything. Maybe we'll be excited. Maybe we'll be angry and disappointed.
Yep. It'll be interesting. So that was the next episode, BlacKKlansman. As always, you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of the social media. Go and leave us a like, a rating, a review, or whatever on all of the places that you download us. Check us out on social media and come back in 1 week for our review and breakdown of BlacKKlansman. Until then, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else,
Keep reading books.
keep watching movies, and keep being awesome.